What's up, folks? I'm Mr. Cakes here. We were in the downtown Civic Park. We were having a conversation here today with Miss Breslin. Miss Breslin, if you could introduce yourself and why we're here today.
Hi, I'm Karen Breslin. I am a candidate for the U.S. Senate. I'm a Democrat. Actually, I'm a progressive Democrat running against John Hickenlooper for the U.S. Senate. Hickenlooper has to obtain the Democratic Party's nomination, and I am contesting him for that nomination. I'm in this race because I believe very much that our political system needs to serve the interests of working people, not the largest corporations and not the billionaire class. For too long, the political system has ignored the interests of working people and marginalized communities, and that needs to stop. I'm a political science professor at the university level. I was a 25-year employee of the National Park Service, so I understand something about how the bureaucracy actually works. Before I worked for the National Park Service, I was a reporter covering Congress and the executive branch. So the so-called deep state, the regulatory state, that's something I know quite a lot about. I'm a lawyer. I've litigated some constitutional issues over my career and I did PhD coursework in international relations, as well as my master's degree in political science. So I think I understand the operations of the federal government pretty well, the various issues that it faces at a national and a state level, and I think that will allow me to bring some insight into the challenges that face our country.
What separates you from John Hickenlooper?
Well, he has what I don't, which is clout. As I like to say, the only fat cats in my corner are my two barn kitties. And I don't have friends in high places. I don't have people pulling for me who've got big bank accounts and can stuff that money into my campaign coffers. It's just me and a hearty band of volunteers who believe that it's time to put this party on the right track.
Against John Hickenlooper, you believe that you would be the progressive choice of the party. Would you say that's correct?
Very much so. I'm a Bernie Sanders sort of Democrat. I have a deep interest in racial justice. I have a deep interest in supporting marginalized people, whether those folks are Native peoples living on reservations and not getting what they are required to have under treaties and under international law, or whether that's homeless people living in a place like this. Marginalized peoples need to be represented in our government, and that doesn't happen enough.
Absolutely. So you believe that you can bring that representation for the marginalized communities?
Yes, and we will know no justice in this country until that happens.
Facts. No justice, no peace. And now,
Exactly.
what's filling your motivation? Like, why do you, I know what you can do as a senator, but why do you want to be senator?
Well, I'm smiling because I've lived in Washington, D.C. I covered Congress as a reporter. It's not the funnest of places to live or the funnest of places to work. I am not naturally inclined to be the sort of person who enjoys cocktail parties and small chit-chat and those sorts of things. So from that standpoint, Washington doesn't appeal to me at all. I'm also not a person who's impressed by position. If someone holds a title, that means they're special. I don't feel that way at all. But what I do feel deep inside is a motivation to stand for and with people who are suffering in our society, and really globally for that matter. And a lot of that suffering is unnecessary and could be greatly reduced. Maybe not down to zero, but greatly reduced. Because over the course of my life, I've seen the suffering increase. We did not used to have the homeless population that we have now. Just to use one small example. Native peoples continue to live on reservations where there's underfunding of education, underfunding of health care. That's entirely unnecessary. And so we've become a society that has lost our empathy. We've become a society that is much more focused on division, much more focused on scapegoating. That needs to stop. And Democrats need to stand firmly against scapegoating.
Absolutely. Almost like backdooring, it wasn't me, it's them, point the finger, okay, we're not.
Well, too often they accept the narratives that the Republicans push out. That immigration and migration has something to do with the conditions in this country. And I think there's very little evidence to support that. But what it is good at is the scapegoating. It's really good at looking this way instead of that. Instead of looking at the people who actually hold power in our society.
It's like forming a gaslight on all of them.
Exactly. And that is very well stated. Yes, I think that's exactly, and that's the purpose of it, right? Like, let's not look at the handful of billionaires that control so much of the wealth in this country. Let's be concerned about the person who fled Mexico and risked life and limb to get into this country and then finally make a little bit of a living and a little bit of a place for themselves, which they have to do illegally because the laws don't really make it easy to become a president here.
It's a fact.
Right?
It's really hard, really.
And then blame them for the negative conditions that exist in our society. It's obscene, it's grotesque, it needs to stop. We are all in this together. What makes America great is our commitment to each other, the pluralism that exists here, the diversity that exists here. That's what makes this country great. That someone can be one religion and somebody else can be something else. That we can live peaceably side by side and have each other's backs. Right. That's what makes this country great. And so the MAGA movement is about tearing all of that apart, about creating division.
It's not about unity at all.
Not at all, not even a little bit. And that doesn't make America great. When lies are allowed to fester without being challenged, and this is really what angers me about individuals who hold high positions of power and don't use that to assert a moral argument. Because when white supremacy is taking root, it's because people in positions of power are not pointing out how vicious and bankrupt that ideology is. And they kind of are coy about it a little bit. I pretend it's not really what's going on. Immigration is all about white supremacy.
Exactly.
That whole issue is all about white supremacy. And it needs to be called out for that. And I'm more than happy to do that as U.S. Senator, because that's the right thing to do.
That's what we have to do.
Exactly. I mean, just since Trump has been elected, or come into office, we've had people taken off the street simply because he has decided to revoke their legal status here on the basis of their speech. Now, that is clearly un-American in terms of our constitutional system. It's a violation of everything that this country is supposed to stand for. And while there's been outrage, there's not been sufficient outrage from some of the most powerful people in this country.
It's been very modest.
Yes, exactly. And
Almost
I don't understand that.
Almost
I don't understand that.
And so you're saying you're willing, as senator, to go against the grain?
Absolutely. I mean, you can hardly shut me up about this stuff.
I have interviewed the office of John Hickenlooper, and I have asked them these same questions. And one of the questions I'm about to ask you is a direct question that they refused to answer. So, Miss Karen, now that we're sitting down, what is your position on freedom of Palestine?
Palestine needs to be free, and there should be no more military aid. And that what's happened there has been a travesty. And it's a stain on this country, it's a stain on the world in some respects. That excessive loss of Palestinian life and the withholding of aid and the absolute utter destruction of people's homes, and now the idea of doing ethnic cleansing there, none of that is legal under international law, nor is it even remotely moral.
What role does the U.S. senators play in the armament?
Well, they're frequently asked to vote on whether to authorize that spending. And Bernie Sanders, just a few days ago, proposed a measure to halt any further military aid. Both of our senators voted to allow that aid to continue. What you can do is what Sanders tried to do, is stop further sales. And that's where I would put my energy.
Stopping further sales.
Yeah.
When I was with Hickenlooper last year, or earlier this year, we asked them the same thing, and their position was no comment. And so the fact that I was able to ask you that, and you did not hit me with a no comment, and then end the video call, this is very important. We're sitting down here with Miss Karen Breslin. So I believe she does have the chance of unseating a primary Democrat. Now, with that, the reason why I believe that is we are in a time of progressive issues. Just because you are a Democrat blue does not mean I'm voting for you. Just because you're a Republican red does not mean I'm voting for you. We are now voting issues and policy. Policy is what makes a politician in their career path.
We haven't had any significant environmental protection laws in about 50 years.
Really?
So we think about climate change. You know, the Democratic Party is pretty good about talking about climate change, but they are not very good about, spending money on renewable energy is about the extent of the party's policy on that. But we ought to be thinking about things like protecting carbon sinks, which are just natural places that absorb carbon because it doesn't do damage to the earth. We ought to be thinking about incentivizing less consumption, so tax credits for not driving as much, tax credits for living in a smaller house instead of a larger, those sorts of things.
Great.
Yeah, exactly. Incentivize people to just do less consumption, because the earth is at its breaking point in terms of the amount of stress that we're putting on the natural resources to sustain us all. And this is particularly, of course, an issue for the foreign world.
It's not just a party issue; it's the entire country's issue.
It's the entire world's issue, really. We've been stuck in a fairly narrow policy, framework for decades, literally. And none of the major problems that are facing our country or the world are getting better. So we've got to start trying some new ideas.
Miss Karen here, she is the definition of a grassroots. She has no main donor. She has no big outlet that's saying, hey, do this, do that. And from my understanding, she's against lobbyists. She's very progressive. And I believe she has what it takes to defeat John Hickenlooper.